Perfect. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's meeting. It's July 10th, the first meeting of July, I assume. We have a couple of agenda items today, but before we start, is there any announcements that you want to share in today's meeting? Okay. If there's no announcements, then we can start with the first item in the agenda. Improve developer experience for V8 related flags, issue number 43407 in the Node repository. This was a pretty old issue. Let me take some time to read it once again.
I think that's related to how we use the V8 flags, like to print a bytecode, or when the code gets inlined. That's quite useful when you are profiling. But I mean, at least on the clean.js side, what we do, we use the -- trace inlined or something. And whenever a code gets in line, we receive that on the output, and then we parse it. So it's not straightforward. So probably this is one of the issues this is about.
Okay, so I added this to the agenda item. As it seems, Benjamin tagged the performance team saying, is there any willingness to tackle this? So we can just set a help needed label, help wanted label, and if there's any willingness in the next meeting as well, then we can keep this in the agenda item and tackle this. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. Let's go to the second agenda item then. What's new for the Node.js performances? This was a issue created by John. There's this new initiative to have an RSS reader, RSS feeder, as well as a single point of view to track and announce the changes in the performance related changes. I wanted to discuss this because I'm not in favor of having an additional issue to keep track of what happened and what's changed. And I wanted to hear everybody's opinion towards it.
I think that's a global initiative, right? Like all the working groups. I have shared the same opinion with Michael. Like, it's good to share what's new, but as a working group or as a team, it's very difficult to have an improvement on every meeting. So I told him that perhaps it's better to reduce it to 3 months, or to increase the time frame to 3 months or to 1 month. I don't know, but to every meeting, that will be hard, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's up to the team. I mean, at the end, the main target of this is every time that there is a replay to this issue, we have like a GitHub action that actually is taking this information and post it on a feed kind of thing. So people that are not following actively day by day what's going on the working groups and so on can get some news. So I think it's up to the working groups and the teams and so on to define, how frequently they want to do it, if they want to include it in the agenda, or even not. You can just pin the issue, and if there is something new relevant that we want to announce at any certain point, we just post it, and that's it. I think that's more or less the approach. I think should not be that heavy, to be like in every meeting or so on. So I think depends a lot on how the teams and working groups works independently. So yeah, it's more a matter of the voice for us to tell something like spread out, you know.
Yeah, so like from my perspective, performance is not a working group. The main reason for it is to not have like a specific responsibility or a goal, because it's a continuing process. And on top of that, we are adding like the performance label to pull requests that are particularly focusing on that. And my main concern is that if we don't see anything solid in this issue, it will be demotivating for new collaborators, and it would create this feeling that there isn't anything going on with the performance initiative in Node.js. But particularly, some performance improvements might not be worth all of these changes, and some are. And that's why we have these announcement parts in meeting notes. And also we have this, and also we have this label that we add in order to put your change to the top of the button, the notable changes label. So there are too many factors that we can put, and I think that it's creating some burden. Maybe instead of an issue, if we just keep track of notable changes and perform like all of the pull requests that has a notable change and a performance label, it will be a lot easier to keep track. And that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, that would be slightly different, because I mean, usually we tag things as notable change when it's notable for end users. And sometimes we perform something on the performance side that is not totally notable for the users, but is notable for the Node.js developers. So like, for instance, we are adding the V8 fast API call. So if you want to get this change to your API, make this change as a Node.js developer, a Node.js core developer, that would be a notable change, but not for the end users. But yeah, I can agree that this can cause some maintenance burden. What I will try to do in the security is just to share what we did and things that we accomplished in the last month, or regardless of the time frame, what we did. For instance, in the performance side, I feel that we have improved the read file sync last month. That's all. You know, like, you don't need to specify a lot of things. I think that would be great, because sometimes the read file sync might not be notable.
Yeah. Then I recommend just having, like, instead of looking for multiple change and performance label, we can just put the link of all of the pull requests that happened in 2023 with the label performance, and it would be a lot easier, because most of the time we have some unique contributors that contribute from time to time and make significant changes in performance, and most people don't like spend too many time writing and explaining it, and because of that burden that Rafael mentioned. And so yeah, like, should we keep it in the performance agenda, or like I pinned the issue in the performance repository right now, and we can keep it as it is and remove it from the performance agenda, and we can, like, somehow we need to remind ourselves that to update this document from time to time. And how are we going to do that?
I think it's totally up to the team. I think you can discuss it asynchronously with all the team and see if they like it or not. If not, you don't need to do it.
Okay. So I suggest removing the performance agenda and like discussing asynchronously about this. Is there any other concerns regarding this before we proceed to the next agenda item? Okay, so the next agenda item is the Redis URL initializations in ESM, number 92 in the performance repository. This was a issue created by me. It was an ongoing process for the past month. I've opened 3 different pull requests to remove unnecessary URLs, unnecessary parsing of content, but there are still some, and it requires a certain level of refactoring that I personally don't have the time for. I will be meeting with Jacob in 2 days to talk about loaders and what can be done for the performance part of it. But I wanted to add this to the agenda so that if anybody wants to take it and complete the last part, I would be happy to hand it off to. Okay, so let's continue to the next agenda item. Number 91, improve the performance of package.json reader. So as you know, whenever we start a node process, and if there's a node modules, it traverses through every folder looking for package.json and file. And while doing that, it also goes 2 levels or 3 levels up into the directory to look for the package.json if there is any. This is particularly slow. And my first assumption was that this was caused by our parsing method and how we validate it. In order to solve this problem, I've created 2 pull requests, and later Antoine created 1 more pull request to merge ESM and CGS loader package.json readers into single one, which is right now merged into the main. But after all of those things, while adding SimJSON to Node.js, I realized that 99% of the time to parse 100,000 package.json URLs are spent on V8. And only 1% for parsing URLs are spent on SimJSON. And because of that small percentage, even SimJSON is 10 times faster than the current implementation. The output the end user faces is super small, and it's not noticeable. This put me in a tough spot because right now this proves that the main overhead of loading a package.json reader file is V8, and it's by a significant margin. And I've talked with Daniel about this, Daniel Demire, the author of SimJSON, about what can be done to upgrade it, like how can we improve the performance. And he created a repository just for benchmarking Node.js solution for parsing URLs. And I will share the GitHub repository in the Zoom chat, and we can add it to the meeting. But even with these changes, it's not worth it. And I'm out of ideas, and I wanted to ask the community or anybody that has some knowledge about this can contribute or point us towards the correct location. Is there any question, feedback, or any concerns? Ruben, I think you're muted. Like, you're not muted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, you should hear me?
Yes, I can hear you right now.
Perfect. So if I'm not mistaken, the original plan was to implement SimJSON in Node, but it doesn't offer such a big difference at the moment that adding a new dependency was something that everyone was aligned with. So the question here is like, is the current plan and to implement it in V8 instead?
So adding SimJSON didn't provide us a significant performance boost. That's worth adding a new dependency, as you said. And the current method, so the whole point of optimizing package.json reader is to improve the loader's performance and also the startup performance. And right now, V8 is the overhead, and V8 is causing all of these performance issues, which hints me towards there is something much more significant and unavoidable in terms of performance in Node.js. And maybe this is something related to how we are using V8, or maybe this is directly a performance impact, performance bug of V8. But in either scenario, this puts me in an area that I'm not experienced in, and that's why I wanted to ask for other people's feedbacks or opinions about it.
I mean, I remember when I looked into improving CJS performance, the main problem is there the actual parsing of the code. That was like most time spent at that point of time, and everything else is pretty much difficult word, not so big, not a lot compared to the parsing time. And therefore, even like the file loading, yes, it is work, and we optimize that a lot. But like, is it really making a big difference here? JSON parse is probably only very, very little involved. Yes.
So my main concern is that I created a benchmark which called internal function of like package.json reader function, and I did this for 100,000 times, removing all caches just to understand the overhead of like the CPU cycles of this operation. And this showed us that 62% of all of the code that was in the benchmark was caused by built-ins find ordered hash map entry, which is a V8 file. I have the CPU profile screenshot, which I need to update it somewhere to share it with you. But okay, I will just put it inside the GitHub issue and upload it there.
Mm-hmm.
The meeting notes, so you can see that.
Mm-hmm. But coming back to the original question here, like, I believe the problem that we want to solve is independent from SimJSON. Do we all agree to that?
Yes, it's independent, but
okay.
Yeah, so it's not about SimJSON. SimJSON is fast, but right now the overhead is V8 or how we use V8, and yeah. All right. I just shared in the GitHub issue, by the way. If you refresh and go down, you can see the CPU cycles.
Yeah, thanks. I'll have a look at it in a second. But coming back to the SimJSON in this case, like, because we still have the open PR about implementing it in Node. And for me, it was still unclear if this would still be something that is like planned from the performance team at the moment or not, or what an alternative would look like.
I don't think it's so. I only left it there to maybe come and take a look at it in 1 or 2 weeks and have an epiphany or realize that I made something significantly big, like an error. But I don't think it's feasible to add SimJSON unless we prove that SimJSON provides a lot of like significant performance boost. But because 1% of the package.json reader function is caused by the package.json reader, optimizing 1% doesn't show us anything, and I can't use that information to convince convince other collaborators to accept a PR that doesn't show a positive value, especially in a size of like a SimJSON library size, which is really great because of all of these SIMD optimizations and different CPU architectures. I also shared another screenshot of the benchmark and the CPU cycles for that as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just what I was wondering about, if we are talking about SimJSON at all, or like the benefits that it currently provides, what I personally would focus upon is to talk with the V8 team in this case, if it makes sense to implement like some subject sections of it, or a SimJSON as a whole thing, or something like that, to improve the current parser. Because, and that's the question, if there is like any room for improvement from V8 side.
So the issue is right now, the current implementation of package.json reader is that we just traverse through the whole string. We just check for if we have certain keys and then return a Boolean as well as the string. And then we call this JSON parse method on the JavaScript side, and that's it. And this is what I was trying to beat with SimJSON. But if I move that whole operation to C++ side, the overhead of serializing strings, passing a complex data structure like an array or an object, or I don't know, like an unaliased array buffer.
May I interrupt? Sorry,
yeah.
Because at the moment we are talking about two separate concerns. Like, you're still focusing on the loading part, which we already agreed is not possible to improve much by changing the JSON parse logic, because it has very little overall impact on the loading performance, right? So that's why I didn't look upon that at all anymore. But my question was more about, like, if we want to improve JSON parsing or serialization in general from V8 side, if that's still something that we could improve further, then it would maybe make sense for general topics that have something to do with JSON parsing or serialization, to talk with the V8 team to implement further improvements there. That was my last question.
So definitely we need to contact with them, but I personally don't know anybody from the V8 team. If you or anybody has some contact there, I will be happy to explain the situation that I'm in and trying to find some solutions.
Ruben, could you just explain again the problem we are facing? Because I think I was wondering something similar.
At the moment, we have JSON parse and JSON stringify, and if I'm not mistaken, like SimJSON would still probably beat the current V8 implementation. I'm not certain if that's the case or not. Like, I didn't look into the topic deeply. Yeah, so that was my question about. What I'm wondering is if that implementation is indeed faster than the current implementation, SimJSON, if it is faster, then we should probably ask the V8 team if they are interested in like implementing that as a basis for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they should be looking to it. Probably they didn't because of, I don't know, cross-platform concerns or something related to the browser environment. I have a contact on V8. I can share it with them. Basically, the idea is to see how feasible is to include or to have a performatic approach to serialize the string or deserialize the string in the V8 side, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just arbitrary ones, like not specific about package.json, but just in general, because JSON, and JSON parse or JSON stringify is something very, very frequently used in a lot of applications. So improving that might not improve Node's performance itself, but it very likely improves performance of actual
JavaScript,
applications
yeah.
out there.
Yes. Particularly for any server-side rendering web applications that serializes that information in the DOM and also parses it and then like dehydrates it. That's also impactful for them as well.
Okay, let me just take a note on
So
this.
this is the first step of the problem, like how can we improve the JSON parse in V8? And there's also the problem of returning complex data structures from V8 to JavaScript, because adding SimJSON, even though the parsing is faster, the overhead of serializing, so previously it was returning a single string, right now it's returning an array of strings, which is like name, type, exports, imports, and those kinds of things. It's becoming more and more noticeable.
So the question here is, again, like it could be that a specific implementation in V8 at the moment is already very good for returning JavaScript objects. And we have to check if it is feasible to use what Sim.json is providing. We might also speak about not implementing like the full library, but only checking if we could use parts of it in the current implementation of V8's own parsing.
Yes, but in either scenario, if you don't return a single string, but if you return an array from C++ to JavaScript, the performance impact will be still noticeable. Because like the whole optimizations that we can do right now with Node.js is all bounded by the serialization cost of V8, as well as UTF-8 values like the byte length and the conversion of the UTF-8, so on and so forth. And
you mean the bridge, right?
The bridge, yes. And I'm starting to lose my creativity towards optimizing it, because it's all at the end bounded by, like, if you can't return, it's like I need to return 3 different strings from a function, but if I can only return 1, because that's the most optimized way. If I return an array, it won't work because it's a string. I can't pre-allocate it before the function and access it through another binding. So this is all the overhead of V8 and Node.js, and any small improvement towards this is going to improve all functions in Node.js, which I'm a lot more interested than solving this specific problem. And that's why I'm super hyped that Ruben recommended talking to V8 team about this, because it will also improve their performance as well in Google Chrome. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, the bridge will be always a cost. And I mean, if nobody from Node.js looks to it, I don't think V8 will look, honestly, because it's basically, I'm pretty sure they use V8 serialize and deserialize everywhere, but I think we are one of the most affected users. So
Yes.
yeah, that will take some time.
Yeah, but let's talk with them, you know, like we can't improve anything or figure it out if there is still room for improvement without taking a deeper look. I believe they are best to look on their own. And it's also good to keep a close contact in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think we have on the Node.js /V8 anything active. Maybe Joy?
Not actively. Joey doesn't work for V8. She's working.
Yeah. But she knows about the V8 code, right?
She does, yeah, at least partially. I mean, depends on the area.
Okay.
Like worst case, we can at least open up an issue on the tracker, tracker from V8.
Yeah, maybe Yagas, you can comment in the issue and explain about the actually it's better to create a new issue for JSON stringify and JSON parse with some benchmarks and show that this is not bounded by Node.js, but also if you just show a Google Chrome comparison, then you see that this is not Node.js fault. and I don't know, maybe aligning that issue.
But that's again a different story, right? Like we are separate.
Yeah.
Like I would say, let's separate all the concerns and have individual things to talk about, and we can definitely come back to the like looking closer in how we can improve the boundary crossing thing.
Yes, absolutely. I meant to create another issue just because it's totally different. JSON parse and JSON stringify, and then we go to the package from JSON reader. So, but I think the first step would be looking to the stringify and parse, and then eventually, I mean, both can be in parallel, but
yeah,
I don't think we can do both at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. And like one small issue about this is that there are certain edge cases that needs to be handled because it's in loaders and there are lots of tests. Particularly like for a particular test, you need to validate if the package.json file that you read is a valid one. And I tried to do it on the C++ side using sim.json, which is super fast, like extremely fast and optimized, particularly for M1, the machine that I was running benchmarking. And even validating the string and returning like the minified, sanitized version of that package.json to the JavaScript side has this overhead, which is causing this performance degradation. So my the outcome that I realized is that there isn't any optimizations that we can do right now in package.json reader without like with my knowledge, and that's why I've started to look into more about how we use V8 in Node.js, and I wanted to also ask if like who should I talk or ask my questions in that manner.
Just a side question here. The goal of this issue basically is to improve the startup time, right?
Startup time, require time, like loading modules, everything.
Yeah,
I mean, it affects startups.
Mainly startup time, right? Because once required, it's in the cache.
Yes, that's true. But even if you don't use any requires, it also uses package.json reader because it tries to go up 3 levels. And if you have lots of modules, then the overhead becomes much more noticeable.
But what I meant was like once I load all of them, it's like I don't have any other penalties.
I actually discussed this once a few years ago with someone from the V8 team, and also tried to come up with some own ideas. And one thing that we really need is pretty like what you can already have like a snapshot of files and that you're going to read, but they have to be created up front so that the parsing time is significantly reduced while loading. And we can pretty much only do that by knowing about what files we want to parse, what files we want to snapshot. That would be an improvement. For example, if you have like a CI system where you could have like a build step pretty much, where you then create all the snapshots and put them somewhere in your file directory, and then we could load them. So we reduce our loading time significantly from there on. But this would require for us to define where should we put these files. How do you define where to look up, where these files lie, etc., etc. And that is something completely inexistent so far. So we would have to really give this some thought. That's one of the biggest issues at the moment, like really the parsing time. And there is no room for improvement from some of the parsing time because they already try to reduce that time significantly. And therefore, it's a little bit like thinking creative in other ways and then just improving that time. It's like a hook pretty much that we could provide by saying, okay, you check if this file exists, which lists like all the files that we want to load later on. might, you know, we might add a build step pretty much in Node that allows you to snapshot all files in a specific directory, then adds like a meter file for it.
Yeah.
And we, as soon as you start Node again, it will check, is there meter file existent? Yes. If it is, we only load those, and we reduce loading time by half.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, sorry, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. Sorry, Rafa.
Just wondering how this could be correlated to the single executable applications. I mean, I know that when you build a single executable, you can give that directive. So basically, it would be already read in the compile time, right? So the startup would be in that field, right?
Yeah, that would be possible. We could already provide that, because there is like, it could be.
So that would be the first easy MVP,
good
right?
point. Yes, absolutely. I like that.
By the way, I remember this issue from a couple of years that Ruben mentioned. I read them, and just a couple of weeks, I think the author of Ban, I forget the guy's name, but he just mentioned, like he put a benchmark on Twitter saying that if you minify and then run Ban, it is going to be a lot faster than starting Ban from scratch. So the minify part is extremely optimized, so it traverses everything and creates snapshots, as Ruben said, and then running it is a lot faster. The only concern I remember from that GitHub issue was that what happens if that serialized information is corrupted, or what happens? How are you going to validate if it's valid or not tampered with? But these are all edge cases, and I think this is a good step towards. And maybe we can ask TSC about if anybody wants to tackle this, or like at least talk about this.
Well, I think we can just mention someone from the single executable team if they are willing to it, because sometimes they are thinking about it. And regarding the validation of the integrity validation of the app, you can just use the policy. I know that there is an ongoing discussion or pull request that Bradley is implementing enforce policy on single executable applications that will only run your application with the policy, so it will guarantee the integrity of the file. So that should be fine.
I mean, in this case, we don't even care about it after, like, putting together the executable, right? You only have to check it during the executable, and that's actually pretty great. You can invest a lot of time there. Like, we don't worry about the creation time, in this case, of the executable. We only worry about the startup time when you want to execute it. And there, we don't have to verify it anymore as soon as we already, and because we can already implement that in a binary, which we know the hash value of, you know, like we know the whole snapshot's hash value, and we just check that single hash value. That's super fast.
If not, then just fall back to the original implementation and start from like
actually,
do the hard work. Yeah,
I wouldn't fall back. That would be
just
like
throw the error. Yeah. Just crash the application. That's
it. That's also true. Yeah, defensive coding has its edge case. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Should we continue to the next issue?
Yeah, please.
So,
just one thing. I don't think we'll be able to comment about the issue 81 because of the time, I guess. So can we just move to talk about it, because I basically blocked that request and I just want to say it.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely.
Basically, this pull request, I blocked that pull request because it was adding a complexity, basically transforming things to C++, and it was not showing any performance improvement, like let's say 1%. But I don't think that's that's feasible to have something that will increase the complexity without adding any value in the performance side, even though it's not in the profiling. It's not in the code stack of a CPU profiling, it's still in the same performance comparison. So that's the reason I block it. And that's basically against some of the performance laws. Like you cannot optimize something that will go only up to 2% or 1%. So I feel that we should not have that pull request. And I just don't want to request change and just block it forever. I just want to make sure that everybody agrees or understand that probably we should not have that pull request landed on main.
So I have some knowledge about this PR. I've been reviewing it, and I think I'm the only one approved it. You blocked and I approved, which is great because it's two sides of the coin. Is always good to convince each other. I think you are correct. I think 1% is not worth this change, but I also don't think the overhead is that much because there's just another node trace events file, which is like a new class, which binds data, which is a aliased array. Yes, it's not like 400 lines for 1% is definitely not worth it. But I think instead of calling this function from JavaScript side and triggering C++ connections every time it's executed, I think we should find a happy path and call that function from C++ if it's possible, and then the overhead of the performance impact will be a lot higher. I don't know if it's applicable to this context because with the current pull request, I can't see where is trace HTTP enabled is called.
Yeah, actually, what I got from I talked with Vinicius as well. And basically, the problem was that on every is-trace HTTP enable, we were calling C++, and then there is a bridge cost. What he did is like, let's store that value of tracing categories in a JavaScript variable, and then I don't need to go to the C++ every time, if I remember correctly. But looking into the code, he's just getting a small bit of that array and then comparing with it, which it's supposed to be cheaper than the current implementation.
But there's still an overhead about it.
Yeah.
So if I look into the code, it says that client request prototype _ finish calls is trace HTTP enabled. And there are a couple of other places in HTTP server that also calls this function, which in server response finish. Maybe we can call this function from C++ and either return a Boolean with that, or just make these calls trace and events on the C++ side.
Well,
but again, I don't know if it's possible. I'm just
I mean, that should be possible, but I don't think that will improve performance, because here I think the objective of this pull request is to reduce the bridge cost as much as you can. If you need to go to the C++ to check it, you already crossed that line, right?
Yeah, but like for HTTP server, maybe we already crossed that line, and when the when the response is ended, we can call it directly from the C++ side of the server response instead of calling it from the JavaScript side. But it changes from implementation to implementation. And
that should be more complex. I mean, I'm thinking about the C++ code, that should be a bit more complex, adding more complexity to the code. Well, if he wants to investigate that, I will not oppose. But
yeah, we can just add this as a comment then. But I agree that 1% is not worth these changes. I had a similar review of my pull request yesterday or 2 days ago. That's like, if you replace starts with, like string prototype starts with if the length is bigger than 1 and the first character is blah blah and the second character is blah blah, it improves by 1%, but it's like, it's not 3-star confident and so on and so forth. So we need to limit ourselves in order to not create burden in maintenance part.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, one of the most important parts.
Yeah, I have a question for you actually, for like both Rafael and Ruben. Is it possible to add a flag to Node.js to count the number of times the JavaScript and C++ bridge is crossed?
I don't think we have a flag for that. I mean, if you manipulate the code, you can add a console
Like
or a tracing point.
Like,
That's
yeah, but like particularly for tracking these things, so we will have much more knowledge about where we are crossing a lot of.
One thing that we discussed at Nearform, I was discussing, because normally I try to create some issues to investigate on open source and potentially in the performance side, is that nobody really knows the cost of the bridge. We know that this is expensive, but we don't know exactly how much is this is expensive. I mean, we know for some specific parts, but not the bridge itself. We know that the HTTP from request and response, there's this cost, but we don't know exactly the cost of that bridge. So I think before counting that, would be great to find a way to measure the cost of the bridge before optimizing it, you know? Because
Yes.
sometimes the issue is not there and we don't know.
That is a bit tricky though, because it will, like, how much impact does something have depends on how often you use it as well, right?
Yes.
So, like, obviously we would like it to be as minimal as possible to not think about, is it a C++ API that we are talking to? Is it a JavaScript API that we are talking to? Because it makes our lives as maintainers easier. But at the moment, most of the time, we only look at it if we know that we are crossing the boundary frequently.
Yeah, my thoughts are like, what about listing the operations that is performed, that are performed when we cross the line? Like, is the memory what is the object memory that goes from JavaScript to C++ change? It can cause page faults. It can cause something different that we are not aware, or it's just a simple address redirection or something. At least for me, it's not clear what the bridge can cause. We know that sometimes it's expensive, but we don't know exactly when it is not expensive, when it's okay to have it on the HTTP. At Nearform, Matteo, not the Matteo from TSC, another Matteo, created an example of HTTP library writing C++, and I told him, oh, probably you face the bridge cost that will reduce the performance impact, but sometimes the performance was so high that the bridge didn't mean anything, you know. So that was just my thought on this.
Like particularly, personally, I'm more interested in understanding the execution time of the the C++ function that we call versus the overhead, and just having that like execution time compare with each other, and just having like a red or green console error messages, just to see if it's worth crossing that C++ function for that particular item. Because most of the time, we just cross the boundary for like is HTTP tracing enabled function. We cross it, we return a boolean. The execution time is less than 10 nanoseconds, but inside that serialization, it takes 100 nanoseconds, and it will be a lot easier to find optimizations.
Well, but wouldn't that be possible just by adding some timers?
Yes, and that's what I wanted to talk. So maybe we should add it. Because like
you mean adding to, okay.
Yeah, it's super easy to implement, but like I think we should do it. That's what I'm trying to say.
One thing we can do is to add dynamic tracing. That should be a bit tricky because V8 changed the name of the functions, but I'm actually researching about it. I have also talked with Mary. She's interested in that field as well. But what you can do is to try to dynamic tracing in your application in the binary. If you use some Linux tool, I only know Linux tools, okay? It will show some binaries, the function binaries, and then you can put some dynamic tracing on that using eBPF or USDT. But that's tricky though, because V8 changed the name of the function, gets inlined. That's quite hard, you know. We need to do a lot of things in the Node.js scope or in the V8 scope to make it happen.
Yeah. If you're already researching for this, and if you need an extra hand, I'll be more than happy to help, because as the time progresses and like as the time we optimize certain things, we are getting uncreative, and we can't find any more optimizations because of all of these limitations, and finding those bottlenecks would be a lot helpful for us.
Okay, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Okay. For before we end in 5 minutes, do you want to talk about a specific issue in the current code? Maybe fastpath for Node application, issue 90.
Oh, this one I think should fall in the same line of thinking. I don't think for instance, if you just remove all one research he can do is basically remove all the things that node deprecation calls. Like if you don't pass the node deprecation, remove all the function that would be called and see the performance impact against with and without the label. And that's basically the maximum performance you can reach in that optimization. If that, I don't know, for some reason that goes above of 5%, I don't think it's worth it to investigate.
Yes.
It should actually, especially in real code, be completely inexistent, because the optimized code will only have a check if that variable might ever change. You know, it's like a static value as such.
Exactly.
Everything static should actually be removed from compilation. So I doubt that it has an actual impact in an application during real runtime, besides like very first executions where the code has to be parsed and optimized.
Yes, that should be that should fall in the same line as I thought in the previous pull request.
There was in the issue 90, Vinicius added a comment saying that I did some experiments with ESM internal resolve, and by putting an if guard for process node application, the results is not that bad, which shows 7 to 9 one star confidence.
Yeah, 1 star confidence is basically nothing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like
but
one
for
star
this particular
really has no reliance. You have to change the benchmark in this case, and the benchmark numbers to have any meaning, because 1 star can easily happen. Sometimes 2 stars happen with 5% difference or more.
Yes.
So
I personally solved a 3-star confidence, which later resolved in performance degradation in the benchmark CI machine. So
yeah, that's the probability issue, right? Like you still have 1.1% of risk. So,
but there might still be a place where node application would be much more confident compared to ESM node default resolve.
Like in this specific case, I believe investing, like there is not much gain that we can have. Like even if a theoretical gain would be there, it would be a simple if Boolean check that we optimize away. And an if Boolean check is so cheap that even if it would be executed and not removed from actual code execution, that would not be really worth it out of my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Basically, what Ruben said is like, if this will not cause any branch detection, because once it's true, it's always true. Once it's false, it's always false. So it's not even a branch, so you can optimize it. to no branch, you know, like.
I'm, by the way, writing notes to the document. So the current benchmark shows 1-star confidence, which doesn't show any improvement. If there's anything specific that you want to mention for this issue.
Like in this case, I wouldn't even trust the benchmark at all. Like in this case, like it's even from the poorest theoretical approach, you know, like all we can optimize here is about, we are only talking about hitting a single if true or if false. That's pretty much all we can, like if true, that's all we can optimize away and improve. That should be very cheap. And I believe any optimization in that direction would be too much effort and maintenance overhead to optimize, even if it would improve, let's say 0.5%, because I cannot imagine anything above.
Yeah. True. Okay, then I think that's it. Before we close, I also wanted to mention one last thing, which is a PR of mine, which is open for more than 2-3 months or something. I added a simmed neon optimization for byte length, which shows 5% improvement, 3-star confidence improvement, which is extremely hard to understand, even for me, because it was optimized 3 times by Daniel and then a couple of other folks from Intel. And I wanted to ask your opinion about if it's worth having this much complexity like in Node core.
I mean, I'm fine with that. The only problem is that if Daniel leaves the project or you leave the project, who will maintain that, you know? I mean, that won't be a breaking change to revert that pull request, so I'm fine with that, you know, like if that's for some reason become a breaking change, I would object, yeah. But I'm good with that.
I already championed fixing, like adding these changes to V8. So they assigned me to the bug tracking issue in V8. So if it's not accepted in Node, then I will spend some time to land it in V8 as well.
But looking to the pull request, there is, you mean 5% of improvement, but you didn't mention the machine or the hardware, because it looks like this is
Neon,
specific to hardware, right? Like to the CPU.
So this is only for Neon, which is Mac devices, not Linux. If you want to add for Linux, then we need to also add an implementation for like AVX or SSE or something else, which is going to bloat the code more and more.
Oh, so yeah, that could be a problem. So this code, the node simd.cc, will be only executed on OS X?
So if you look into line 12, it says Node has SIMD Neon.
Yeah.
So it will only be executed on Neon. And there's like on line 48, there's an else, which is default fallback function, which will execute it, which is the normal execution, which is the original code that we have in V8.
Okay. And I assume that for every other optimization in different architectures, we should have an file or an if like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Neon is the hardest part, by the way. I can easily say that Neon is the hardest part. So the other will be a lot smaller.
Well, I would not approve, but I would not request neither comment, because it's out of my knowledge to approve or request change.
And yeah, that also says something, because it's open for 2 months and there isn't any approvals other than Daniel right now. So
so yeah, people should be concerned about that too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in this case, what about implementing something like that directly in V8 that you've spoken about? Because actually, especially improvements on that level, where we are talking about such low-level operations, out of my perspective, the best place to implement them would be in V8. Question is just, do we have a functionality that V8 exposes to provide the same information at the moment as we are accessing it here in our own code? That's something I do not know.
V8 has this UTF-8 length function, which is directly correlates to this function.
Well, then perfect out of my
Yeah.
perspective. Then
Just replace that, yeah.
The only
Please go
issue is
ahead.
that, yeah, the only issue is this cost of context switch for me to go back to V8, and because I didn't contribute to V8 at all. I want to, but there needs to be some sort of like a mentorship for me to onboard, and I don't know anybody that can help me and answer the stupid questions that I ask. So that's why I didn't pursue this.
It's not that hard, actually. I believe there is a documentation somewhere as well. The most difficult part is the compilation time.
Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
like
I have like a
6
really
hours.
good machine. Yeah.
It will still take time.
I by the way, I already compiled it. Like it's working, but again, the context switch is costly for me, especially with a baby, a 1 month baby. So
Yeah, I think that would be the best scenario, you know, like instead of adding branches to the Node.js, we do it directly on V8. That's probably the best approach.
okay.
Yeah.
So
We need to go.
Yes. Is there any questions that you want to mention before we close the call? Perfect. So thank you all for coming, and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye.